Our lesson today, we want to be able to find percents of numbers and find the whole given the part and the percent. There are two key ideas that we're going to take a look at today. First, you can use a related division question to find the whole given the part and the percent. All right, and you can take a look at that here. 20% of 60 is 12. Write the percent as a fraction. The word of means multiply. 1/5 of 60 is equal to 12. So 12 divided by 1/5 is going to be 60. That's the related division question. Finding the percent of a number. 20% of 60 is 12. Right? You can multiply by the you can write the percent as a fraction, then multiply by the whole. The percent times the whole is equal to the part. Right? Let's do some problems. All right. The first example here, let me get to my pen. 25% of 40 is what number? Right? The first step, we want to write the percent as a fraction. Well, the word percent means out of 100. So 25% as a fraction is going to be 25 out of 100. The word of means multiply, and we're multiplying by the number 40. The word is going to be an equal sign, and the phrase what number is going to be our variable. That's always going to be the case. Each part of what I like to call the percent question translates into some part of an equation. The percent I write over 100. The word of means multiply. The number 40 will always be an equal sign. The phrase what number is your variable. And now we want to multiply 25 over 100 times 40. Well, usually we multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. But let's divide out first. Right? I could divide out a 0 and a 0 here. Then I could divide out 4 and 10. 4 and 10 become a 2 and a 5. But then I can divide out 5 and 25. 5 goes into 25 5 times, so that becomes 1 and 5. So 25% of 40 is what number? Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 5 times 2 is 10. So I wind up with 10 is equal to n. Alright? You're also told you can use a ratio table to find the percent of a number. Right? Well, how would we do that? Well, we start with 25 over 100. And I want to know 25 over 100 is equal to what part over 40. Right? So if I'm making a ratio table, it would look something like this. Right? What over 40? Well, in order to go from 100 to 40, well, what can we do here? Well, 100 over 25 over 40. Let me erase that and give me some space here. All right, and add a little bit more to my table. All right, let's put the 40 here because we need an in-between step. I can't go directly from 100 to 40, but what I can do is simplify 25 over 100 to 1/4. And now I can go from 4 to 40. 4 to 40 is times 10. So that I have to multiply times 10 here, and that would give me 10 over 40. Right? So I can use the ratio table that way as well. 25 over 100 is equal to what over 40? I write an equivalent ratio, and I find my answer that way. Let's continue. Finding the percent of a number using a ratio table. Similar to the last problem we just did, right? We start with our percent. 60% is 60 over 100. We're looking for out of 150, so that's going to be my denominator. I can't go directly from 100 to 150, but I can divide that by 2. That's going to give me 50. That's going to give me 30. Then I can multiply by 3 here. Multiply by 3 here. That's going to give me 90. So we're saying 60% or 60 out of 100 is the same as 90 out of 150. They're equivalent ratios. 60%, the word percent is out of 100. 60 over 100 is the same as 90 over 150. Right? So let's take a look at some of these examples down here. Right? And we can use different strategies. 90% of 20 is going to be, let's do number 1 here. It's going to be 90 over 100, right, times, right, 90% of 20, right, that's going to be 20 over 1. Right, I can divide out 0 and 0 here. Right, what else can I divide out? 2 and 10 becomes 1 and 5. But then I can divide out 90 and 5. Right, 90 and 5 goes what? That becomes 1. That becomes 18. Then I can multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 90% of 20 is equal to 18 for problem number 1. Let's try problem number 2. Oops, that green is too thick. Problem number 2. 75% of 35. I would write 75 over 100 times, because the word of means multiply, 32 over 1. Right? I want to divide out where I can. Well, 32 and 100, I can divide at least by 4. So if I divide by 4, that's going to give me 8. That's going to give me 25. But then I can divide out 25 and 75. That's going to give me 1. That's going to give me 3. Now I can multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 3 times 8 is going to be 24. So 75% of 32 is going to be 24. Let's try problem 3 down here. Right. Problem 3, we have 10%, which would be 10 over 100, times 110. That's over 1. Divide out, divide out. 10 and 10 become 1 and 1. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 1 times 11 is 11. So 10% of 110 would be 11. Alright, and then we have problem 4. Problem 4, 30% is 30 over 100. The word of is multiply. 75 over 1. I divide out where I can. That becomes, if I divide out by 25, that becomes 3. That becomes 4. Then I can divide out 34 by 2. That becomes 15. That becomes 2. Alright, and then, let's see, I can't divide out anywhere else, so I multiply numerator times numerator. 15 times 3 is 45. Denominator times denominator. 2 times 1 is 2. Right? And 45 over 2 is going to be what? 22.5. Right? Would be our answer. So 30% of 75 would be 22.5. Let's take a look at our next example. We want to be able to find the whole. 75%, oops. Right? We have 75% of what number is 48. So I start with my 75 over 100. The word of means multiply. The phrase what number will always be our variable. Is an equal sign, and then 48. Now, I'm going to rewrite 75 over 100 because we need to know the simplest form of 75 over 100 is 3/4. So that's 3/4 times n is equal to 48. Now we're asked to multiply by the reciprocal, right? Because I want to get n by itself. In order to get n by itself, we'd have to divide both sides of the equation by 3/4. They would cancel each other out, so we're left with n is equal to 48 divided by 3/4 is the same as 48 over 1 times the reciprocal 4/3. Right? I can divide out what? 3 and 48 becomes 1 and 16. 16 times 4 is going to be 64. So 75% of what number is 48? That number would be 64. Let's take a look at our next example. We can use a ratio table as well. 120 over 100. Right? I write the percent over 100. 72, right, is the part. We're looking for the whole here. Well, I can't go directly from 120 to 72, but I can divide by 20. If I divide by 120 divided by 20, it's going to give me 6. 100 divided by 20, that's going to give me 5. Then we multiply times 12, that's going to give me 60. right? So 120% of what number is 72? That number would be 60. Okay, so let's take a look at how we would do each of these. 5% of what number is 10? I start by writing 5 over 100. The word of means multiply. The phrase what number, that's my variable. Is an equal sign, and then we have 10. Now, to get n by itself, we'd have to divide both sides of the equation by 5 over 100. Right, divide by 5 over 100. These cancel. That becomes 1n. Right, and I write 1n that way. 10 divided by 5 over 100, that becomes 10 over 1 times 100 over 5. I can divide out. That becomes 1 and 2. 2 times 100, we get 200. Right, so 5% of what number is 10? That number would be 200. Let's take a look at example 6. 62% of what number is 31? I take my 62, write it over 100. The word of is multiply. The phrase what number is our variable. The word is our equal sign, and we have 31. Now, 62 over 100, I can divide that out as what? 31 over 50. So I'm going to do that. 31 over 50 times n is equal to 31. To get n by itself, I'd have to divide both sides by 31 over 50. I'd have to divide by 31 over 50 here as well. They cancel each other out. That's going to be 1n. 1n is going to be equal to, well, that's 31 over 1 times 50 over 31. You divide out 31, that becomes 1 and 1. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, n is going to be 50. 62% of what number is 31? That number is going to be 50. Let's take a look at our next example. Real life application here. The width of a rectangular room is 80% of its length. Find the area of the room. Well, we need 80% of 15, so we have to find 80% of 15 first. That's going to give us the width here. So 80% of 15, right, that's going to be 80 over 100. The word of is multiply, 15. Now 80 over 100, we can simplify that. We should know the fractional equivalent to 80%. That's 4/5. So that's going to be 4/5 times 15 over 1. Divide out here, that becomes 1 and 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So the width here is going to be 12. To find the area is going to be equal to length times width. Area is going to be equal to 15 times 12. That's going to be what? 150 and 30. Area is going to be 180 square feet. Let's take a look at the next example. Right, the on your own problem. It says the width of a rectangle is 55% of its length. The stage is 120 feet long. What's the area? Well, first we have to find 55% of the 120, right? If I'm looking at a picture here, right, this is 120. We need to find the width, right? That's going to be 55% of 120. Well, 55% is going to be 55 over 100, right, times 120. What can we divide out? Well, I can divide out the zeros, right? Put that over 1. I can divide out 10 and 12. That becomes 5. That becomes 6. I can divide out 5 and 55. That becomes 11. That becomes 1. So 11 times 6 is 66. So the width is going to be 66. Then I can use the area formula to find the area. Area is equal to length times width. Area is going to be equal to 66 times 120. So 66 times 120, I'll do that over here. 120 times 66. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1. 6 times 1 is 6. 1 is 7. So that's also going to be 0 to 7, right? I have to add that together. So that's going to be 0, that's going to be 2, that's going to be 9, that's going to be 7. So the area is equal to 7,920, and these are going to be square feet. All right? Right, the last problem we're going to do here, or the last page anyway, right? It says you win an online auction for concert tickets. Your winning bid is 60% of your maximum bid. How much more were you willing to pay for the tickets than you actually paid? Well, your winning bid is 60% of your maximum bid. Well, the winning bid is $125. So that $125 is 60% of some number. Right? What number? That's my percent question. So we write our equation. 125 is equal to 60% is 60 over 100 times n. Right, times n. 60 over 100, I can simplify that. 60% is 3/5. So now I have 125 is equal to 3/5 times n. To solve for n, we'd have to divide both sides of the equation by 3/5. Divide by 3/5. They cancel out. So n is equal to 125 divided by 3/5 multiplied by the reciprocal. So that's 125 times 5/3. Let's see, can I divide out anywhere? 125 times 5/3. Can't divide out anywhere. So let's see, 125 times 5/3. So let's see, 125 times 5, then divide that by 3. So that's going to be 125 times 5. So 5 times 5 is 25, carry the 2. 5 times 2 is 10, 2 is 12, carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5, 1 is 6. So 625 divided by 3. 3 into 625. 2 times 3 is 6. Let's see, something's not right here. That's what's wrong. Oh, gotta redo that. I knew something was wrong because that wasn't going to work out. Right, the mistake was actually because the problem is written so small, right? I didn't see it very well. So it's actually going to be 120. I read that as 125. So it should be 60%, or 120 is 60% of what number? Alright, that's really the question here. So that's going to be 120 equals 3/5 times n. We want to divide both sides by 3/5. Divide by 3/5. They cancel. So it's going to be 120. So n is equal to 120 times 5/3. I can divide that out. That's going to be 1. That's going to be 40. 40 times 5 would give us an answer of 200 there. Alright? Alright. That's going to be it, as far as the lesson. And so, good luck.